Before I start, I want to say this isn't advice. I'm not speaking from the other side of this with answers. I'm just noticing something in my own life right now, and I'm still learning how to deal with it. So if any part of this lines up with something you've been experiencing, just take from it whatever's useful. I've been noticing something about the way my days unfold, and it took me a while to realize what was actually happening. Right now, I've got a few larger projects in front of me. There's a book I'm writing, a business I'm building, and then there's the work I do that brings me an income. For a while, I thought the real challenge was figuring out which one of those things deserved my time. If I had a free hour, what should I move forward? The book, the business, or the work that keeps everything stable? At first, that felt like a real crossroads. But the more I've paid attention to the way my days actually unfold, the more I've realized that's not really where the difference happens. The difference shows up much earlier than that. It shows up in the first few hours of my day. When those hours are quiet, when they're fully mine, something very different happens. I wake up early most days now, around 5 in the morning. Not because I'm trying to be extreme about productivity, but because those hours feel different when the world hasn't really started moving yet. I'll make coffee, and I usually just sit with it for a while. No phone, no noise, just quiet. Sometimes it's a half hour, sometimes a little longer. After that, I'll stretch out for a while, usually about 45 minutes, and I'll normally put on an audiobook while I do that. And by the time that's done, something in my mind feels settled, clear. And once that state shows up, I can sit down and work on almost anything. Most mornings, it's the book. Not because writing is easy. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the words come out slowly. Sometimes you sit there for a while, wondering where the next thought is going to come from. But other mornings, you sit down and suddenly 2,000 or 3,000 words come out without much resistance at all. And what I've noticed is that when the morning starts that way, when those first few hours are quiet and fully mine, the entire day feels different. My mind is clearer, decisions are easier. Even the practical work later in the day feels lighter. The work that brings in income, the smaller business tasks, the responsibilities that just need to be handled. They don't feel like they're competing with anything. It just feels like the day is unfolding in the right order. But on the mornings where something else takes those hours, the day unfolds quite differently. An obligation, a meeting, something that already owns the beginning of the day. And it doesn't even have to be a bad thing. Sometimes it's still productive. Sometimes I'm still growing in some way. I might be listening to an audiobook while I'm doing something else. I might be working on smaller pieces of the business. But the mental state is different. Even if I come home with plenty of time left in the day, even if there are still several hours available, something about my mind has shifted. Instead of creating things, I notice I drift towards smaller work, maintenance, surface level tasks, things that keep everything moving, but don't really move the bigger things forward. Emails, organizing something, tweaking small details. And none of those things are bad. They just aren't the same kind of work. And for a while, I thought the lesson here was simply about protecting the morning. Maybe waking up earlier. Maybe guarding those hours more carefully. And I've started doing some of that. That's actually why I wake up around 5 now, just to reclaim a little more space before the rest of the world starts asking things from the day. But the thing I've been noticing lately is a little different, because those hours don't actually feel like productivity time to me. They feel like free time, time that belongs entirely to me. And when something takes that space in the morning, the strange part is that I spend the rest of the day quietly trying to get that feeling back. Not always consciously, but it shows up in the way I move through the rest of the day, and the way my attention drifts towards easier tasks. in the way big creative work suddenly feels harder to step into, even when the time is technically there. And recently I noticed something that surprised me. The mental state I associate with the morning, the quiet thinking, the ability to sit down and create something, isn't actually tied to the time of day. It's tied to quiet. Whenever I manage to recreate that quiet later in the day, when I step away from the fragmented momentum of everything that's been happening, that mental state comes back fully. The challenge is remembering that I can do that. Because once the day starts moving, it's very easy to forget that resetting is even an option. You get pulled into the flow of whatever the day became. One small task turns into another, and suddenly the hours are gone, even though the deeper work never really had a chance to begin. So lately, I've been paying less attention to the clock and more attention to the environment my mind is in. Quiet versus noisy, ownership versus reaction, creation or maintenance. Because what I'm starting to see is that the real crossroads in my life right now isn't between the book, the business, or the work that pays bills. The real crossroad shows up whenever I have a chance to return to that quiet state and decide whether I'm going to step back into it. Because that's where the things that matter most to me actually move forward.